Alright, well, this is Mike Arthur for Biology 876. Going to take a look at the curriculum topic study for plant life, and I thought I would do that out here in our native plant garden. This was built and designed and implemented by students about 4.5 years ago. Features a variety of plant communities with plants that are native to California. And the goal that I had for using the idea or for looking at plant life was to help make better connections between the students and concepts, develop some ideas that would increase the unity between the concepts, and to help uncover some of the misconceptions so we can head those off at the pass at the beginning. Alright, for identifying adult content knowledge, I'm out here in the oak woodland. Okay, my oak tree is a bit on the small side still. From Science for All Americans, the adults know that plants versus animals in terms of their energy source, plants getting it from the sun. They know about plant and body plans being used for classifying, that individuals that are able to sexually reproduce together make a species. They know about molecular differences between them. They know that diversity is important for a variety of reasons, including the two webs that are dependent upon plants, the microscopic one in the ocean, microscopic plants in the ocean, and the land plants making up another web. They, from achieving science matters, achieving scientific literacy, we look at taxonomy being based on physical appearances. You got the making the 5 kingdoms, or using RNA making the 3 domains. Okay, out here in the chaparral plant community, this is the one that's most common around this area. We've taken a look at considering in the instructional implications. We see looking at differences in the organisms and trying to identify which differences are most important, and that is their sophistication increases. They're able to move from the external differences to the internal differences, including cellular activity and molecular structure. We also look for patterns of similarity and differences, and look for reasons for that and connect it to genetics and ecology and evolution. Grades 6 through 8, which is the grades that I teach, we try to make connections to geography as they study a particular area, what plants are found within there. They recommend looking at internal structures and using a real classification system instead of ones that the students develop themselves. We're looking at individual species and recognizing that plants cycle nutrients, and that's from the benchmarks for science literacy. We also look at cells within microscopes and move from looking at not just plants as individual species, but how they fit within populations and communities, and that's from the National Science Education Standards. Okay, we're out here at the pond. This was built with the help of a local company, the Pond Digger, which helps with the schools. They built this in a day. We probably had almost 100 students coming out here in shifts putting this together from flat ground. By the end of the day, the pond was installed and ready. And here we'll identify concepts and specific ideas. And the benchmarks for science literacy talk about students knowing that plants use sunlight and animals don't, that body plans or structures are designed for making food and reproduction, that when plants have similar structures we can infer relatedness from that, and they recommend having them classified using external and internal structures. If we look in the National Science and Education Standards, they say take a look at internal structures and chemical processes, take a look at common ancestry and showing connections between them, and how evolution leads to diversity. Okay, out here in my pseudo-riparian area, I examine the research on student learning, and I see this every year. Students have a hard time classifying what is a plant. They see things like trees as being separate from weeds and vegetables and plants. To them, a plant is something that you put into the ground, that you cultivate, a small herb, and then everything else is within their own set. They also tend to classify by look or habitat rather than physiology. That's understandable. But one of the big concepts is really trying to get them to understand what a plant really is and how inclusive the category is. Okay, out here in my desert with a struggling meadow back behind it, we examine coherency and articulation based on the Atlas of Science Literacy, and they use the topic of natural selection. In 3rd through 5th grade, the students are looking at the idea that habitats change and different plants thrive in different habitats, that individuals are different and these differences might give an advantage. When they hit 6th or 8th grade, we see that the changes that happen in the environment can actually affect the individuals and species, that there's competition. We introduce the idea of artificial selection, and by the end we're seeing that small differences can accumulate to make big differences. And then they move on to high school, where they deal with these same ideas in inheritance at the molecular level, and introduce what the concept of evolution and natural selection, pull it all back in together. Okay, so now we're here in the shade house. We share with the local masters gardeners, so I can't take credit for everything that's going on in here. But here we'll to clarify state standards in the district curriculum, and as we look at the state standards, the ones that tie in, students know that the difference between plant and animal cells. They also have to have an idea of the levels of organization, from cells, tissues, organs, up to whole organism, and the functions. They know that organ systems function because of the individual organs and tissues and cells, and that each one is responsible for making the whole thing work together. One part fails, the whole system can be affected. Students need to know about how plants reproduce. So we plant seeds. This is part of what this structure is used for. We plant seeds and grow plants from here, and we also do plant propagation with vegetative propagation. In fact, we'll be starting that in a couple weeks now that spring has started. And they also need to know how to construct a simple branching diagram to classify living groups and be able to extend that out to some fossil organisms. Within the district, it means that we do plant cells at the beginning of the year. A little bit later, we deal with photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And then right now we're dealing with plant tissues and organ systems. We look at hormone regulation within plants. That's where the vegetative reproduction comes into play. And we also look at sexual and asexual reproduction within the plants. So tying it all together, hit the misconceptions at the beginning, make sure that they know what a plant really is. We use the structures and organizations to look at similarities of the plants, both externally and internally. We take a look at reproduction, take a look at regulation through hormones, and we look at differences between plants and use that to construct branching diagrams and link to natural selection and evolution. And that's when we're doing plants specifically. We also take a look at plants' cells and photosynthesis at different times within the year.